country. You must have seen some pieces of the Bharati theater in this country in Tijan Bhai's Kapali and Vedamati Pandwani. That is the Bharati theater. This is exactly like that. On that pattern, Devendra Zankur asked his actors to read the story and act out certain portion of the story themselves. We also have some Nukkad Natak, we call it Nukkad Natak or street corner theater in which you do not use much of the costume. In one uniform, the entire play is acted out, and in fact, it is a theater of protest, which has borrowed its style, structure, and idiom from Bertolt Brecht. And Bertolt Brecht's epic theater, which avoided any simulation or any empathy, or you can he called his theater as the intellectual theater of the intellectuals. So from Bertolt Brecht, this idiom of the street corner theater was borrowed, and it happens everywhere in the university. Or anything wrong which happens in Delhi, there come up the groups of the street theater performers, and they protest against any immoral or unnatural or unethical thing. So we have other theater directors also. For example, Satu Sain in Bengal, Hasmukh Baradi, and Habib Tanvi. You know Habib Tanvi's Naya Theater. He picked up his actors straight from the folks, and then he produced his Mitti Ki Gadi, Agra Bazaar, and Charan Das Chod, three famous plays. So we another, when we talk of the modern contemporary Indian theatre, we should also talk of the institutions which are promoting. At the moment, almost in every third university, we are running theatre course in MA in theatre, and these universities are, of course, your Bombay University. Baman Kendri was the professor and director of your Bombay University, and then Satish, Satish Alekar, he was also a professor in your Pune University. You have the Theatre of Performing, the Department of Performing Arts. In Pune University, we have MA Theatre in Andhra Pradesh University. We have theatre courses in Vishwabharati University. We have theatre course in modern in Punjab University. We have theatre course in Patiala University. And then we have theatre course, not exactly the theatre course, but course in arts and aesthetics in Jawaharlal Nehru University, Delhi. And then we have theatre course in HNB Garhwal University, Srinagar. Then we have theatre course in Doon University, and then Himalaya University. And recently, National School of Drama has started theatre, 1 year theatre courses in this Tripura, and then in Banaras, and two more places. I'm forgetting the names of these places, but they have started the theatre courses. And we have the government academies. For example, National School of Drama. Then we have Bhartendu Natya Academy in Lucknow, and we have Madhya Pradesh Natya Vidyalaya, and we have 4 centers of NSD, as I told you, at Sikkim, at Tripura, at Bangalore, and at Banaras. And one more at a very important place, which is known as Nina San in Karnataka, which is doing a fantastic work in theatre. And there are other private ventures also in theatre which are running in this country. And theatre has become a very vibrant genre of performance throughout the country, and it is becoming very popular. Very recently, the Central Kendriya Vidyalaya organization of the country has decided to teach theatre, or to have a teacher of theatre almost in every school. So when I'm talking of the theatre, I'm talking of the theatre which once upon a time, or some few years ago, had become very unpopular, not because of the over-the-top OTT media, because of films, because of so many other things, and the social media and the digital media, now there is a resurgence and rebirth of theater almost in all the parts of the country, because theater is quite different from this digital medium or this film medium. Theater is a performance. Theater is a participation. Theater is a ritual. Theater is a ritual which purifies your body and your soul. It is not just the play seeking its results in the play itself. It is said that there is a difference between the ritual and the plays. The ritual, when we do perform the ritual, the result is sought outside the ritual. Something else, something good is going to happen in your life. But when we do perform the play, the result is sought within the play itself, which is called rasanubhuti, or which is called catharsis, or which is called healing. Sometimes it is healing also. We have so many theater forms which are used for healing, healing a patient of psychoneurosis or any other malady or any other distortion which happens in the personality of a man or a woman. But it gives you the rasanubhuti, the best kind of pleasure that is available, intellectual pleasure that is available on the earth. So theater is different from it is a different experience. And I believe that in every university, every college, even all the teachers, every teacher has to be taught theater. Otherwise, most of the teachers are very boring. When they go to the class, the students remain sleeping. But there are teachers, when they enter the class, the entire class is charged. That is that is the body language of the teacher, that is the personality of the teacher, and that is the amount of knowledge he commands at his possession. All these things put together make a teacher different. But a theater training for all the teachers to improve their diction, to improve their communication, must be introduced almost in every university and every school. And that is all I want to say today. Thank you so much. And now you can ask me questions.
Thank you so much, Professor Purohit. We'll get back to you at the end of this session. So we'll have the question answer round at the end of the session, which is after the next speaker's talk. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. I remain joined, connected.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Okay, so our next speaker, our last speaker for today is certainly not the least, and I say that with as much pride as he expresses through his work on various contemporary literary themes, with LGBTQ studies being the most prominent among them. Professor R. Raja Rao is an internationally acclaimed author, speaker, literary critic, and scholar. He is the retired head of the Department of English, SPPU. He has published 5 collections of poetry, which include Bomgay, the collection that served as a basis of the late Riyad Wadia's much acclaimed short film Bomgay. Fiction work includes 4 novels, a collection of plays, and 2 collections of short stories. His novel, The Boyfriend, has been translated into Italian and French and has been optioned for a motion picture with international collaboration. His nonfiction works include Nissim Ezekiel, The Authorized Biography, Criminal Love, Queer Theory, Culture and Politics in India, which won Likho Book Award for Excellence in Media in 2018. Rao's work as a poet and writer has been discussed in various scholarly books. These include Forbidden Sex, Forbidden Text, New India's Gay Poets, Gay Icons of India, and Reading India Now, Contemporary Formations in Literature and Popular Culture. In 1990, he received the Nehru Centenary British Fellowship for postdoctoral research at the Centre for Caribbean Studies, University of Warwick. In 1996, Rao was invited as a writer in residence to the International Writing Program, University of Iowa. Rao's other fellowship includes the Quebec India Fellowship of Concordia University, Montreal, and the Indian Council of Cultural Relations Rotating India Chair Fellowship at Tübingen University, Germany. This introduction can go on, but I'm quite sure you must be impatient now to hear from the man himself. So please welcome Professor R. Raja Rao.
Thank you. I'm just confirming that I can be heard and seen by everybody.
Yes, sir.
Fine. The title of my speech is Technically Criminal. It's somewhat an intriguing title, Technically Criminal, LGBTQ writing in the backdrop of Section 377 of the Indian Penal Code. But, you know, the title makes sense because we are technically criminal even now, as I'm going to be going to try and explain to you why. Even after the decriminalization, the final reading down of Section 377 in September 2018 by the Supreme Court, um, has really changed very little. And the way I see it, is that society becomes not just an ally, but it becomes an accomplice of the law to continue with the discrimination against, against sexual minorities. So that is really the focus, that 75 years of independence and 72 years of the republic and so on. But for minorities, you know, and there are different kinds of minorities. I mean, somebody could talk about caste minorities, others would talk about gender. But my constituency is sexuality, and that includes the LGBTQIA plus community because there are newer and newer identities that are emerging. And we continue to be a marginalized minority and worse off than the other minorities for the simple reason that our constituency has to do with sex, which makes a lot of people uncomfortable. It continues to be a taboo subject for a lot of people. It's linked to morality and to religion. Religions across the spectrum, are not really very open when it comes to matters pertaining to sex and so on. So all of these things, sort of go against us. Let me begin by reading out for you the wording of the 1861 law, Section 377 of the Indian Penal Code, which was authored by none other than the famous Thomas Babington Macaulay, the very man who introduced English education in this country earlier in 1835. So the wording is as follows. I can be heard, right?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Okay. The wording is as follows. Whoever voluntarily has carnal intercourse against the order of nature with any man, woman, or animal shall be punished with imprisonment for life or with imprisonment of either description for a term which may extend to 10 years and shall also be liable to fine. That's the enunciation of the section, but then there's an explanation that follows, and the explanation says penetration is sufficient to constitute the carnal intercourse necessary to the offense described in the section. So this was a law that was made a part of the penal code, which was basically criminal law, way back in 1860 or 1861. And would you believe it continued to exist in the law books in India till just 3.5, not even 3.5, or maybe 3.5 years ago. The mother country, England, which introduced the law in India, thought it fit to do away with it exactly 100 years after the law was first introduced, around sometime in the 1960s. But we, you know, uh, held on to it, and not just held on to it, but we began to think that alternative sexuality or different kinds of sexual practices are against Indian culture, contrary to all the pre-colonial evidence, that is present in 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 so many things, in texts, in the mythology, in the sculpture, temple sculpture, and so on. So all that evidence was disregarded. It was sort of, I think amnesia is the term. I'm thinking of Devi's book, After Amnesia. But amnesia is the term because, and in a way, that's what the British wanted. They wanted us to forget our past, and they succeeded. Now, I have to restrict this to the representation of LGBTQ sexuality because if I start talking about uh, LGBTQ sexuality per se, then it'll take too long and it'll sort of be all over the place. So I'm going to restrict it to the literary and maybe in some ways the cinematic representation or the theatric representation of LGBTQ sexuality. I'm going to divide this into three parts: pre-independence, and then independence up until 2018, when the Supreme Court, like I said, finally read down 377, and then post 2018, that is between 2018 to now, which actually is the most important part of the talk, because what I would like you to see is that precious little has really changed in terms of, I called society an accomplice of the law. And even though the law has been read down, mind you, it's not been completely discontinued, but it has been read down. But societal attitudes, continue to be very hostile. And a number of instances, number of examples that I can give. I'm also going to, I can't exactly give you the links, but most of these things I have written about in scroll.in. So if you just go to scroll.in and type my name, you'll get all these instances of discrimination against the LGBTQ community, even after the 2018 judgment. But first to what happens before independence. One of the very important things that happens in the year 1942 is that this Urdu writer, I'm sure you've all heard of the name, Ismat Chugtai, wrote a novel called Lihaf. Lihaf was in Urdu. It's been translated into English as The Quilt in a Penguin India edition, and that's still in print. I mean, you can order it on Amazon. But when she wrote Lihaf in 1942, she was booked for obscenity. This was undivided India. So the case was filed in a high court in Lahore, which was part of India at the time. This was also the year of the Quit India movement. The case was filed in a Lahore court, and she was booked for obscenity. She had a good lawyer, and so she managed to win the case because the lawyer was able to convince the jury that you know, the, uh, the short, it's actually a short story, and the short story writing a short story did not amount to performing a sexual act, so there's a difference between the real and the represented, which is what I'll come back to. But she won the case. Now, Liaf, incidentally, is the story of two women, a middle-class woman and her maidservant, Now, apparently, there's an injunction in the Quran which says that two people of the same sex, the same gender, shouldn't sleep under the same quilt. And that is exactly what these two women do till a child comes and sort of pulls the quilt off. And then we see these two women, and they're not really doing anything sexual, but they're sleeping under the same quilt. And this apparently is violative of, this injunction in the Quran, which is why the obscenity charge was made against her. Uh, I might also tell you that there are two films which are thought to be um, based on Lihaf. One is, of course, the well-known film Fire, about which I'm going to talk, directed by Deepa Mehta, with Shabana Azmi and Nandita Das. But a more faithful representation of Lihaf, I think, is in a 2014 film relatively lesser known than Fire. This is a Hindi film called De Ishqiya with Nasiruddin Shah, Madhuri Dixit, and Huma Qureshi. And this is a more faithful representation, of the Lihaf story. So you could catch these films on Netflix and get an idea of, what that short story was about and why it became controversial. So this was 1942. Then we come to independence in 1947. And most of the other things I want to say, of course, between 1947 to 2018. So that's the second part of the presentation. Let me start with a Pune-based author, a friend and a colleague of many of us, Suniti Namjoshi, who belonged to a Brahmin family in Pune's famous Sadashiv Peth, who came out as lesbian, but who was told by her family. So this is not just society becoming an accomplice of the law, but even families, who was told by her family that if she wanted to be lesbian, if she wanted to be openly lesbian and lead a lesbian lifestyle, then she would have to leave India, which she did. And Suniti Namjoshi has, of course, spent all her life in the West, Canada first, and then England and America, and she continues to live there and write there. Her well-known novels include Conversations of Cow and Feminist Fables. These are among two of her best-known works. And for her, again, there's this word from homosexual. You get a whole lot of other formulations, such as homosocial, homopolitical. And I would say that in the way in which Suniti Namjoshi links sexual politics to gender politics really makes her a writer whom I could call homopolitical. But the thing that I'm trying to impress upon you is that, in a way, she wasn't allowed to live in India. She comes back from time to time. I met her some time ago in Lit Fests and so on. And I remember this one occasion where we were at the Taj in Bombay, and after a couple of drinks, we were all a little tipsy. And, she points to me and says, "This man thinks he can be openly homosexual in India." She was saying this almost with a sense of sense of regret, sense of envy, because that was not what she was able to do, right? And of course, there's a big difference when it comes to female homosexuality and male homosexuality, as the next point that I'm going to make should establish, because in 1998, when Deepa Mehta made the film Fire. Now, Deepa Mehta is a director of Indian origin, but she doesn't live in India. She lives in Toronto in Canada, and she made this film Fire. This was part of her trilogy. The first film was Earth, which was based on Bapsi Silver's novel Ice Candy Man, and it dealt with the partition. Fire was the second film in the trilogy, and the third was Water, which was equally contentious because it dealt with widows, young widows who are sent away to these Vrud ashrams in Banaras, and they're easily sort of lured into prostitution by unscrupulous politicians and so on. And whatever is not the then BJP, not this BJP, but the then BJP, Vajpayee BJP, did not allow them to shoot in Banaras, and they actually had to go to Sri Lanka and shoot the film over there. But water was made. But Fire, was the film that really got controversial because the moment it was released, and she made it in both English and Hindi. Had she only made it in English, it would perhaps not have become as controversial as it did. But then she also decided to make it in Hindi, and it was released. I remember seeing it in the first week in a cinema in Pune called West End, which some of you old timers would remember. Not the West End Mall of Aun, but the West End on Main Street. And believe me, it was a late night show, and there was a male friend and a former female student of mine who accompanied me. And the moment the lesbian scenes came on the screen, that was the end of the film. I mean, there were catcalls, and you couldn't hear anything. And this apparently happened in cinemas all over India, across the length and breadth of India, so that women's groups even um, asked cinemas to have special screenings for women, which maybe, some cinemas did agree to this, and they had special screenings only for an all woman audience. But the Shiv Sena meant business. The Shiv Sena was in the forefront of, the agitation. They wanted the film banned. There were other right-wing groups, perhaps as well, but the Shiv Sena was at the forefront of this, this whole hullabaloo about the film. Mr. Bal Thackeray went to the extent of saying sarcastically that he would allow the film to be shown. What he said offended him was that, the story is about two sisters-in-law in a middle-class Delhi household who are married to the two brothers in the family, and both the brothers, don't sort of sleep with their wives for different reasons. I won't go into that now, but eventually they sort of find love and passion in each other, and that's what the storyline is. So, and what do you think the names of the two sisters-in-law in the film are? The elder sister-in-law, played by Shabana Azmi, is Radha, and the younger sister-in-law, played by Nandita Das, is Sita. So Mr. Bal Thackeray said that, okay, I'll let the film, um, I'll let it be shown, but give them Muslim names. Why do you have to call them Radha and Sita? The implication being that homosexuality, lesbianism, etc., don't exist among the Hindus. Anyway, eventually they won the case in the court, and today you can find Fire on Netflix, and that controversy is behind us. But during the time um, the film was new, this was an issue. But my real point here is that um, lesbianism got it from both sides. So on the one side, there was, of course, uh, the moral brigade protesting against the film, and they went to the extent of vandalizing cinemas where the film was screened, ripping seats apart and shattering glass and so on. They did all that. So that was on the one hand, but then on the other hand, when women's groups took out a counter protest morcha in Delhi to protest against this plea to ban the film, and certain lesbian groups joined these protests with their own placard. They were not, they were cold shouldered. They were not welcome. They were told that they were hijacking the protest, that Fire was not, and this was what Deepa Mehta herself said in interviews, that it wasn't a lesbian film per se, possibly because these two women are married heterosexual women, and they turn to each other on the rebound because their husbands are not sleeping with them. Um, some people call this situational or circumstantial lesbianism, which I don't really buy that argument. But that was what the women's groups, the mainstream women's groups said. The lesbian groups were not even allowed to take part in these protest marches, which were really about a film that was for the first time in India, apart from Lihaf, actually showing a lesbian relationship on screen. And the ending of the film determines that it was a proper lesbian relationship because it's not as if these women are reclaimed. There have been other works. The previous speaker mentioned Tendulkar, but Tendulkar, he has this play, Mitrachi Goshta, and the previous speaker didn't mention that play. In that play, there is this woman, this young girl who is not attracted to men, but she's reclaimed by her family and forcibly sort of made to marry a man, and then we are to believe that all is hunky dory. She has been cured of her perversion and she has understood her folly and so on. So this was Vijay Tendulkar, who really had no business, if you ask me, to even write a play like that, um, not being from within the subculture himself. Um, so these the ending of Fire is not like the ending of Mitrachi Ghost, a Friend Story in English, or like another film, a cheap Hindi film called Girlfriend. It's not like that, because at the end of Fire you do see these two women deciding, Radha and Sita deciding to spend the rest of their lives together. In fact, there is a there's a scene that sort of echoes the trial by fire scene in the Ramayana, where Radha's sari actually catches fire, but then the fire is put out, and Sita has already left the house, and Radha decides to join her, and the implication is that they're going to spend the rest of their lives together, and they're done with their respective husbands. So that was the ending of Fire. It's clearly a you know a very positive ending from a lesbian standpoint. A year after the film Fire was released, Penguin India issued, and I believe there was some hesitation, but they finally issued these two anthologies, respectively, of lesbian writing in India, edited by Ashwini Suktankar, who is an out lesbian woman, and Yarana, Gay Writing from India, edited by Hoshang Merchant, who is an out gay poet and professor. He's still around. He's in his 70s and he lives in Hyderabad. So is Ashwini Saptankar. I think she lives in Bangalore. Now, with Fire, what happened was, with Facing the Mirror, what happened was that they, with great difficulty, managed to get lesbians from across the country to contribute. But, all of them insisted. First of all, it was called Lesbian Writing from India, but as the editors point out, it wasn't really writing in the literary sense. Because as they point out, some of these women just wrote, maybe small testimonies on scraps of paper and so on, and said that, well, this is all we can write. So they were not finished poems, or some of them were, but not all of them were finished poems or plays or short stories. And but the thing that 99% of the contributors to Facing the Mirror insisted was that they would write under disguised names and they would not reveal their real names in the anthology because that would be too risky. And so that's how the anthology appears. If you get hold of a copy of Facing the Mirror, which is a Penguin India publication, if it's not out of print, you can still order it. You'll see that, only for one thing, only first names have been used. So, if I say that the author of this piece is a Rekha or a Sunita or or a Kalpana, that could be anybody. But surnames have strictly not been used, except in a very few cases, like maybe a Geeti Thadani or a Ruth Vanita, who have not minded their real names being used in Fire. With Yarana, it was a little different, and this establishes my point that again within the LGBT community, again there's a sort of hierarchy with male, gay, men being at the top of the hierarchy, and not maybe facing the same discrimination as lesbians do, and as of course trans people do. I'll talk about trans people because again there are just two transgender autobiographies in print. You know that there's a flourishing transgender community in India. The most visible face of the transgender community is the hijra whom you see at the traffic light. But they've not even, let alone writing books. Most of them have not even finished school. You know, they have no education at all. So the two, and this was a JNU PhD thesis. I was the examiner, and this is how I figured it out. He says there are just two. This was just a few years ago. One is Revati's The Truth About Me, a Hijra life story, Penguin India, written in Tamil, translated by V. Geeta. The other, I'm proud to say, is Lakshmi Narayan Tripathi's Me Hijra, Me Lakshmi, co-translated by P.G. Joshi and me, published by Oxford University Press, 2015. These are the only two transgender autobiographies, and these are trans women. When it comes to trans men, there's a complete silence. People don't even know that the transgender community is made up of not just trans women but also of trans men, and then there are various other aspects to transgender identities, which is very complicated. People call themselves gender queer, gender non-binary, and so on. So I'm not going to get into that either. But the point I was making is that within the hierarchy, of course, um, male homosexuals are relatively, less prone to discrimination and to invisibility and so on. So what happened in Yarana, and there's a lot of my work also in Yarana, is that all of us agreed that the submissions, the things we submitted, could appear under our own names. Now, it's not as if that was without risk. And that brings me back to my title, because we were still technically criminal. The year was 1999. In 1999, even the case to scrap Article 377 was not even filed in the courts. That happened only after the turn of the century, when a support group in Delhi called Naz Foundation first, filed this petition. There are people like Anjali Gopalan and so on in the Naz Foundation, and they filed this case in the Delhi High Court, which initially was just dismissed. And the court is always fond of, referring these things back to the central government, and the central government instantly said, and they still say, and I'll come to that, the attitude of the central government, not just this government, but all governments across the board, that no, this is against our culture and so on. Most people don't want it, don't want homosexuality. It's a perversion. And so, the case does not merit being admitted in the courts. This was the initial reaction till the year 2009. I'll come to that. But the point I was making about Yarana, gay writing from India, is that we risked submitting our work under our own names, including my work. Mahesh Tatani, again, the previous speaker, with due respect to him, didn't mention a lot of Mahesh Tatani's plays, but didn't mention a play by Mahesh Tatani called Night Queen, which is a very homosexually explicit play, which has, it's actually a short play, it's not a full-length play, and it is included in Yarana, and there are references to cruising and references to gay bashing, and it actually uses the F word fucking. But for some reason that was not mentioned. Night Queen by Mahesh Tatani. Then he has other plays. Most of them, the previous speaker did mention Dance Like a Man and Muggy Night in Mumbai. I can't remember whether he mentioned, but that's also a very homosexually explicit play. Gay writing by its very nature, and this is an aspect of queer aesthetics, tends to be sexually explicit. It's easy to see why. If your constituency is sexuality, that's what you foreground. So there's always explicit sexual descriptions in gay writing. You can take it from me anywhere in the world. You can't write a gay story and be squeamish or be prudish about not including sexual descriptions, and sexual explicitness. It's like saying you write Dalit writing can exist without any reference to caste and caste discrimination, or women's writing can exist without any references to gender discrimination, and the whole dynamics of gender, the whole dynamics of caste. So likewise, LGBT writing cannot exist without foregrounding the whole dynamics of sexual activity, which happens. This is where, um, I've talked to lawyers about this, that something that is illegal in the eyes of the law and the representation of it in literature, can it really be argued that these are two different things? If you have a good lawyer, perhaps, and that's how Ismat Chugtai was acquitted, because she had a good lawyer who was able to show uh, the judges, the learned judges, that that the short story in question was only a short story, and there was no actual sexual act. But you might not always have good lawyers, So every time we wrote these things, my own work, tends to have. Actually, I've gone to the extent of saying that when it comes to queer aesthetics, the boundary line between what is literature and what is pornography is very, very thin. It's very, very thin, you know, and it's very easy to argue that this is not literature, but this is porn. I can tell you that, yeah, I'm just sort of letting myself go, so I hope I'm not ruffling any feathers. And if that's the case, I truly apologize. But I have to give these examples. Even in Facing the Mirror, one of the very opening passages is about is by this woman. Name is not revealed. This guy's name, pseudonym. But the passage is about how my aunt invited me to spend the night with her, and we literally the whole night we were licking each other's pussies. This is in print in Facing the Mirror. I'm not inventing it. Now, how do you take that? How does somebody? I was in the board of studies of a college in Goa, and this was a professor, and he said, "Well, my daughter is doing this course, and I don't want my daughter to read stuff like that." So a lot of parents would say that, not just this learned professor, but this is a part of the aesthetics. So what do you say? There's another piece in Facing the Mirror where this uh, woman who is lesbian and also really trans more than lesbian, is sickened by the sight of her own breasts. And the whole story is about how she surgically gets her breast removed, you know. But it's not just, she's not just telling, she's showing us the whole act of getting her breast removed, what happens to those removed breasts. Are they thrown into, she asked the nurse, are you going to, what are you going to do with my removed breast? She actually has the temerity to ask the nurse this question, and the nurse replies with a sarcastic answer. She says, "Oh, well, we just dispose them off. What do you think? We're going to make pickles out of your breast and, stuff like that." So all this is part of our aesthetic wherewithal, right? We can't be prudish about it. So it's very easy for anybody to argue that between the real and the imagined, there's no difference, and all these guys who produce this stuff should be in jail. Now, if we are not in jail, it's not because we are a very liberal country, by no means. But the answer to that question, if you ask me, is that when you write in English, I think Ramchandra Guha has said this also. If you write in English, English is a safety valve. Nobody reads it, or if they read it, they can't understand it. So they let you be. Because I'm mainly talking about writing in English. There is writing now, LGBT writing in Marathi. There's Bindu Madhav Khire's work. There is LGBT writing uh, in the Malayali language. So it is there in other languages as well. But since I work in English, I'm talking mainly about English. Otherwise, it would just go on and on. And we just sort of left alone. It's not because we are liberal. That's why I come back to my title. We are technically criminal. If somebody really sort of wanted, to get us into trouble, they could. You know how today it's so easy to just lug out chabi and instigate somebody in the government or somebody in the ministries and say that, this person is obscene, this person is writing things that violate the law and should be in jail. So that could have happened to any of us. It's just lucky, that we escaped with Yarana. This was 1999. Then we come to the turn of the century. In 2003, my novel Boyfriend, which was referred to in the introduction, that was one of the first major works in 2003, a full-fledged gay novel. A lot of people have called it India's first gay novel. I'm not sure whether it is, but it made an impact. I've written many things after that, but they've not been as impactful as Boyfriend. If you ask me personally, in terms of technique and so on, my later work is more kind of sophisticated because obviously there's more experience. Boyfriend was my first attempt at writing a novel, but still that one's hogged the limelight, and Ashwin Aluwalia acquired the rights, and he's trying to make a film, but he's still not been able to get funding and so on. So it's stuck. But I hope that one day it's made, and it was translated into some European languages and so on. That was 2003. In 2007, Karan Johar. Now, Karan Johar is known to be gay in the Bollywood film industry. He wrote an autobiography in which he admits that he's gay. He called it an unsuitable boy. That reminds you of Vikram Seth's Suitable Boy, and Vikram Seth is also incidentally part of the subculture. Uh, but again, more as a writer than as an activist. He called it unsuitable boy, and he says in so many words that, I sit on the fence because it's too risky for me to come out and say in so many words that I'm homosexual. Although by then, there was a support. There was a movement. The movement started way back in 1990 with Ashok Rao Kavi's Hamsafar Trust, Nas Foundation in Delhi. There were other developments. Sridhar Rangayan made this film called Gulabi Aina Pink Mirror. So there were other, actually, World Magazine, in one of the 2019 issues, has this wonderful photo feature called Hidden City. I'll send you all guys the link. They spoke to 6 of us who were leading openly homosexual lives in the 1990s before the age of the internet and so on. And they asked us how we did it. Ashok Rao Kavi, Sridhar Rangayan, I'm also there, Gauri Sawant, who's a transgender person, apart from Lakshmi and Revati, but she hasn't written an autobiography or anything, and one or two other people were interviewed for this photo feature called Hidden City, and we talk about where we went to look for partners, where we cruised among gay men near the washrooms, and there was a gay bar in Bombay called Voodoo, which has long since been shut down. But there were parks and so on. The park figures in Mahesh Tatani's play Night Queen, which I mentioned. But when Karan Johar made this mainstream film, 2007, called Dostana, again, if you see that film, it's laughable because there are two superstars, Abhishek Bachchan and John Abraham, but they are only feigning gayness in order to find an apartment, and that too not in India, but in Miami. So they're only feigning gayness, and that's the extent to which he could go to bring the conversation to the dining table. But as Oni recently said, that really did more harm than anything else because Dostana became a bad word. I've been a victim of this myself. I was once, it became a bad word because people would sort of bitch and say, Are yaar, Dostana mat kar. And this is not an exaggeration. It happened. I was walking with a friend and maybe we had our arms around each other's shoulders or something. And then, some guys coming said, oh, ye Dostana hai. So Dostana became a synonym for, homosexuality. Um, so that didn't really help. Now, a few years later, Karan Johar made this anthology film in which there are 6 films, and one of them, the first one, this is called Bombay Talkies. The anthology is called Bombay Talkies. The first one is by Karan Johar, Ajeeb Dasta Hai Ye, after the famous song from the Hindi film Dil Apna Preet Para. There he treats it with a little more spine, a little more guts. But that's a short film, it didn't have the same reach that Dostana did. 2007. 2 years later, 2009, something very historic happened. The Delhi High Court finally admitted the writ petition filed by the Naz Foundation and read down Article 377 of the Indian Penal Code. The judge in question was Justice A.P. Shah, who's been known for his progressive and his I would even say radical views and radical judgments. His argument, to summarize it, was that the society might think of homosexuality as immoral, but we need to make a distinction between public morality or general morality and constitutional morality. And the Constitution gives everybody fundamental rights. So if we deny uh, the LGBT community the right to love whom they want, then we are violating a constitutional right. So this was the kind of distinction he made between constitutional and general morality, and read down 377 and said that it wouldn't apply to consenting adult homosexual people. So far, so good. I think we were jubilant when that decision came, and we thought that it was victory, but it was a High Court judgment and not a Supreme Court judgment. So the moral brigade again, went into overdrive and immediately filed an appeal. Uh, Baba Ramdev was not directly involved in filing the appeal. That went under someone else's name, but he did come on air and even say preposterous things, but maybe not so preposterous if you think of the wording of 377, which says, whoever has carnal intercourse against the order of nature with any man, woman, or animal. So Baba Ramdev was saying that, no, if we allow this, the next thing that people will say is that let us legally have, let us be allowed to have sex with animals, make that legal, make bestiality legal. This was trivializing the whole the whole issue. But the case was admitted in the Supreme Court, and exactly 4.5 years later, December 2013, none of us can forget that day. Justice Singhvi and Murlidhar, and Singhvi was on the last day of service, he was to retire the next day, reinstated 377, saying that it was not the business of the courts to decide whether homosexuality should be legal or not. If the government wants to do it, the government can, have a parliamentary or a constitutional amendment and amend the law, but it is not the business of the courts. And we were back to square one. Believe me, there were young people who felt very vulnerable after that judgment because, after the Delhi High Court judgment, a lot of them, we were already out, people like me and Ashok, but there were younger people who felt emboldened to come out because they thought that the Supreme Court would, uphold the High Court decision, but that didn't happen. And suddenly they had become criminals again, right? Now, what do you do after that? A Supreme Court judgment cannot easily be revoked. But still, there are certain legal provisions. One of them is to file a review petition, which again the Naz Foundation and other support groups did. It was thrown out. And the other option then is to file a curative petition asking that the case be heard by a larger bench, because the first case was heard by a 2-judge bench. This miraculously was admitted, and in 2018, September 2018, a 5-judge bench, which I think also had Justice Gogoi, who's in the dock now for other reasons. If you read his latest book, after retirement, getting this Rajya Sabha nomination and so on. But they went back to the 2009 judgment. This was miraculous, believe me, because Very rarely are Supreme Court judgments revised in this way, but it did happen. And we thought that, okay, so now finally we are legal, we have locus standi, we can, openly flaunt our lifestyles, our sexual orientation, our loves, and lifestyles is right because LGBTQ lifestyles are not the same as heteronormative and heterosexual lifestyles. They're different in various ways. I mean, most of us tend to be polyamorous and so on. The concept of marriage doesn't necessarily make sense to all of us. Some people might want gay marriage for certain reasons, but not for all the reasons that heterosexual people have this institution of marriage. Now, this was 2018. Now, I come to really the most important part of my talk, which is between September 2018 and now, which is just a little over 3 years. Okay, what has been the situation? Um, Let me tell you this, and then I'll finish. I promise you, I'll finish. And but I forgot to say something very important, so I'm going to go back to 2009. In spite of the Delhi High Court ruling, in 2010, somebody from our own fraternity, a professor in Aligarh Muslim University, was, he was by virtue of what they called a sting operation. He was caught having sex in his campus flat with a rickshaw rider, a cycle rickshaw rider. He was removed from the job. He was suspended. He was thrown out of his campus flat. He was humiliated by the university, by the town, Aligarh, and by everybody, by all and sundry. This happened in 2010. Now, this was when the Delhi High Court ruling was in force, because it was only in 2013 that the Supreme Court reinstated 377, but between 2009, July 2009 and December 2013, it wasn't illegal to be homosexual. And these guys, this professor was on the verge of retirement. He was 64, and this rickshaw rider was half his age, and they may have known each other. It was transgressive in many ways. It was interclass, it was intergenerational, it was interreligious, because the rickshaw rider in Aligarh, being a Muslim majority place, was a Muslim, whereas the professor is a Brahmin. So it was transgressive in all those various ways. I have written extensively on this. I can send you links. But the point I'm trying to make is that even a high court ruling couldn't save the man. There is a film a biopic, based on his life called Aligarh, directed by Hansal Mehta, and you can watch that film. It's on Z5, but let me warn you, Hansal Mehta has said that half the scenes were cut. So I hope that you were able to, or you can get a DVD and see the film. But in the Z5 on OTT, all the sexually explicit scenes have been cut, because there are sexually explicit scenes of these two guys making love. And what happens really is that his colleagues break into the house, break into his campus flat and expose him, bring the media, take photos, and the next day it's all over the local press. This could be any of us. It could be me. It could be Hoshang in Hyderabad. Fingers crossed that it didn't happen to us, because he was a professor of Marathi. I'm a professor of English. A lot of people asked me, after that film, so how come it didn't happen to you? And I said that I don't have any easy answer to that question. Then they said, maybe Aligarh is a small town, Pune is a city, Hyderabad is a city. I said, I don't know. You can't, there's no single explanation as to why it happened to this poor man. And how did his life end? The Delhi, lawyers, in Delhi, you have the lawyers collective, people like Anand Grover and Brinda Grover. They came down to Aligarh and fought his case and won, because this was the argument that in 2010, they said homosexuality, consensual adult homosexuality is not illegal. He was having it in private. So how come the university suspended him or dismissed him, removed him from his flat and so on? And the court said that he must be reinstated forthwith. But before that, this is how society becomes an accomplice of the law. Before that, the man was humiliated to such an extent that he thought it fit to end his life. You know, we live in a shame culture. He got the news of victory in the court, but possibly he couldn't think of going back to his department and facing those very colleagues and those very students, you know, who had humiliated him to such an extent, spat on his face, abused him, and so on. And so he preferred to end his life. He was a sensitive man. He was a poet in Marathi, and he was a professor of Marathi, and he was on the verge of retirement, and he was a married man, but the family was away in Nagpur. And it is actually still not known. If you see the film, you know, it has a speculative ending that traces of poison were found in his blood, but we're not sure whether he was poisoned or he committed suicide, but it's much more likely to be a suicide. So I forgot to mention this. This was 2010, which implies that even when there is a law, it doesn't really come to people's aid. And that is what I want to say about the Supreme Court judgment of 2018, that though it is there, look at the things that have happened post 2018. You know, after the pandemic, um, everybody, you know, we've all become family oriented, because if I'm sick, right, I need family to take care of me. Since 2020, this has been the case. Lesbian and gay couples have even been denied that right. So there were cases, there are instances where hospitals, there was this hospital in Bombay which told a woman that you cannot be the caregiver of this woman who was really her lesbian partner, because, you know, we need a blood relative. It has to be her parent or child or brother, sister, husband, but you have no locus standi. So what is your relationship to this woman? This really happened in 2020, because a lot of people fell sick and they went to hospital. And you know, we are single. We are single. We don't have spouses and so on. So for this reason, you know, there were people who said that, okay, now we must think in terms of legalizing gay marriage, so that inheritance, caregiving, you know, these things, taking joint bank loans for buying houses, bank loans for buying property, you know, these things, these privileges which the heterosexual mainstream has, should also come our way. But once again, there was a case in the court. The court referred it to the government. The government, I wrote about it in Scroll, was almost acting like the Vatican. And they said that no, the definition of marriage is that it can only be between a man and a woman, and not two people of the same gender, right? So this was, they just sort of said no, no to gay marriage. Um, and also, after that, you know, this I learned recently. You may have heard that people like Karan Johar has two kids through surrogacy, also Tushar Mehta, Jitendra's son. But it seems that now, after that, even the surrogacy laws have been changed, and it seems that LGBT people can no longer are no longer allowed to adopt or to have children even through surrogacy. It has to be a heterosexual couple. This is very recent. This is what I just heard the other day. So that is one thing, okay, that I want to say, that and this, by the way, the gay marriage case is coming up again for hearing in the Supreme Court next month in February. And we are sure that once again it will be, you know, it'll be rejected, because actually when the Supreme Court read down 377, they did say that this has nothing to do with gay marriage. We're not legalizing gay marriage. We're just saying that consensual adult homosexuality is read down. 377 hasn't been completely scrapped, but it has been read down to exclude certain people. So this is the first example. The second example, a Supreme Court judge, Saurabh Kirpal, was refused his elevation to the Supreme Court, even though he was due for it. He was strongly recommended by his seniors. The excuse that he's openly homosexual. The excuse, the ostensible reason for refusing to elevate him was that his partner is a foreign national, and that can be a security threat. But he himself, I wrote about this in Scroll again, and he said that no, I'm sure that this is because I'm openly homosexual. Now, mercifully, only recently I read that he has finally been elevated, and Saurabh Kirpal is now a full-fledged Supreme Court judge. The third example I want to give, I wrote about this in Scroll 2. This was actually this year. No, late last year. Dabur had an advertisement on television which showed, this was a Karwa Chauth, Karwa Chauth, the Karwa Chauth advertisement, which had two women and not a husband and a wife. So the traditional Karwa Chauth is that the woman fasts for the long life of her husband. This showed two women. Believe me, it created a ruckus. There was this BJP minister, I think in Madhya Pradesh, the Home Minister of Madhya Pradesh, and Madhya Pradesh is run by the BJP, who sort of spearheaded this agitation and said the ad must be withdrawn. Within no time, Dabur withdrew the ad, you know. And they've done other companies. I mean, there was a Tanishq ad, Jashne Rivaj. So the corporate sector, again, today you see shows like Shark Tank and all that. Where have they got guts? They immediately withdrew the ad. All that the ad did was that they showed a lesbian couple, right? And then the reasons given were that no, lesbian marriage is not legal in the country, so you can't associate a traditional ceremony like Karwa Chauth with a lesbian wedding and so on. So that is another example. And my last example, which is only now, I wrote about it in Scroll only yesterday. Onir, filmmaker Onir, who made well-known film My Brother Nikhil and I Am, has been refused permission to make a film based on the life of an army man by the name of J. Suresh, who left the army because he's homosexual and felt that he couldn't continue in the army while he led an openly homosexual life. O'Neill met this army man, interviewed him, and scripted the film. And I think it was submitted to the Central Board of Film Certification, which cleared it because being homosexual is not illegal. Consensual adult homosexuality is not illegal in India anymore. But in 2020, the government of India introduced a new rule which said that anything concerning the army must be cleared additionally by the Defense Ministry. And sure enough, the Defense Ministry refused clearance. And that is where O'Neill is stuck. And he thinks that this is extremely discriminatory, that the Defense Ministry should refuse clearance to this film. So when I wrote about it in Scroll only yesterday, I just sort of contrasted it with this film, which you guys must have heard of, Uri, the surgical strike, Vicky Kaushal, and how these guys, that's based on the surgical strike of 2016, how the Prime Minister lauds them for barging into Pakistan and bombing the place and so on. So that is one narrative that is promoted when it comes to the army, and then this is the other side about which. So if this is not censorship, I don't know what is. Um, you're trying to silence us in whatever way you want. Let me end with Martin Luther King's well-known words. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "We will know who is against us, not by what they speak, but by their silence. We will know who is against us, not by what they say, but by their silence." And this government has been studiously silent. Prime Minister Modi, his government, nobody congratulated the LGBT community even after our victory in the Supreme Court. So, my friends, when you talk about 75 years of Indian independence, do keep in mind that not everybody are the same beneficiaries and can gloat over independence, 75 years of it, in the same way. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you,
My
Dr.
pleasure.
Thank you, Dr. Rao. So, as expected, we already have questions in the chat box, and hopefully, we'll have more. Should we begin with the question answers? Dr. Purohit, maybe it's not really a question, but just something which I happened to think as we were listening to you. Dr. Purohit, are you here?
Yes, I'm there.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So you were talking about the Parsi Theater, right? And that's really, I mean, so interesting. I was reading the other day the autobiography of Narayan Prasad Betau and the whole scenario, the start of this Parsi Theater as the first commercial theater, right? So, yeah, so really exciting time it must have been, right?
Yes, it was a very big theater, and because it was the first of its kind in India, and these Parsis who are known for everything, they have their own stories, mythical stories, how they got mixed up with this community like a spoonful of sugar into a glass of milk. No? So they stand out everywhere, but in theater also they started as a competition, as a and as a an encounter to these British commercial theater groups which were invited to India. They were paid very heavily. They thought of competing with them and raising a parallel theater movement that was called the Parsi Theater. Because they were Parsi, the patrons, the managers, the actors were Parsis. And can you believe that in those days, 1,000 rupees, around 1850, 1,000 rupees per month was paid to these script writers, Aga Hasr Kasmiri, Nan Das Betav, and the third one was Radhesyam Kathavachak. They were very heavy to pay. Yes, that was very interesting. And this Parsi theater continued until 1960 when the modern theater introduced by the National School of Drama came into existence. And we high flung gestures, highly ornamental language. And one of the exponents of this Parsi theater was the director of the National School of Drama, Delhi, Brijmohan Shah. I knew him personally. Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, so we were thinking that this would you say that this this aesthetic of Parsi theater gets carried into this modern post-independence theater also? Would it be correct to say that?
Yes. Partly it continues in certain theater experiments. For example, when we are staging Tughlaq, if you have ever seen the production of Girish Karnad's Tughlaq, most of the gestures and the style of language is that of Parsi theatre. Without being very overtly or very explicitly being called so, the gestures, the language, and the body language is that of Parsi theatre. Yes. And we still have in Ramlilas, we have Ramlila everywhere in Indian cities and towns. So the gestures of Parsi theatre are still used by Ravan or by Kardusan or by so many other actors. It continues.
Subarna, I just wanted to say that Giv Patel's play, Mr. Behram, is a very Parsi play. It's a modern play. We staged it in the Department of English way back in the early 1990s. Tony Patel was the director, who's Giv Patel's wife. She's dead now. But it's a very Parsi play, as the name suggests, Mr. Behram. And it's set in that part of Gujarat, because the Parsis landed off the coast of Gujarat, as you know, and
Yeah.
it's about this wealthy Parsi man with his wife, um, Dolly, and his daughters, and then uh, he has this attraction for this Varli tribal boy whom he adopts and brings up, and that's the whole play. It certainly has
Yeah.
a sexual connotation as well, Mr. Behram. But a lot of even in the Bombay theatre scene, there are a lot of Parsis, who are actors, who do these plays. Even when Alec Padamsee put up performances of Arthur Miller and all that, many of the actors were Parsis, you know. So I
Yeah.
think that that connection continues to the present.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. Right. So we have actually many questions to Professor Raj Rao. So maybe we'll take some of the questions here for Professor Raj Rao. So there's a question. Don't you feel that rooting for gay marriage or any homosexual marriage is again conforming to the norm? Don't you feel that rooting for gay marriage is again conforming to the norm? That's what is.
Of course, I feel that I'm strictly from the lobby that opposes gay marriage, except for the reasons that I stated. The reasons being that, when I die, I want my boyfriend to inherit my property, but I don't want some distant blood relation to emerge from somewhere and say, who's this guy, right? And we have claims to our brothers or cousins' property. So, for those reasons. But otherwise, yes, because marriage, as it exists, is a highly patriarchal institution. I don't want that we should again be seen as husbands and wives. Believe me, it will happen. It's too ideal to say that a gay couple, a married male gay couple are husband and husband. You can say that in theory. But believe me, the one who has more feminine mannerisms will be taken to be the wife. Or in the case of a lesbian couple, the woman who's more masculine will be taken to be the husband. We don't want that. We don't want to, you know, we don't want to import all that, I would say, patriarchy, misogyny, sexism. Do you think we want to import all that into our subculture? We are free of it. We can be polyamorous without, in a completely different way, you know, from a heterosexual marriage. I find this very funny, a woman, okay, the husband's even looking at another girl. You see all these on television and on OTT, all these serials and all that. Oh, they will, um, you make a big issue of it, right? All hell turns loose when if you just look at somebody. So you're taking monogamy and fidelity and all that to that level. We can comfortably be polyamorous. We can comfortably love multiple people at the same time without feeling insecure. So you're right. I don't know. And the other day I happened to hear Ashok and Shobna. Shobna incidentally runs Queer Inc. She's an out lesbian woman who has started this publishing house in Bombay just for LGBT writing. It's called Queer Inc. She's doing my latest collection of plays. Since we were talking about plays, it's called The Wisest Fool on Earth and Other Plays. It's actually got 10 street plays and 3 monologues. So, and she's done many other books. She's done I mentioned Yarana in Facing the Mirror, but Shobna did the first anthology of gay writing in the 21st century. It was called Out, Stories from the New Queer India. Arti's brother Milind Vani has a piece in that anthology. I heard her the other day and I was hearing Ashok, and I thought that they might be pro-gay marriage, but I was very happy to hear that even they said that, that they were against gay marriage, except for this one reason, right? That the legal benefits that would accrue. That's it.
Right. Thank you so much, Professor Raj Rao. We will be coming back to you once again with the questions. Maybe there is one question here that I can see for Professor Purohit. Amay asks that there are a few plays that have been made into series on OTT, like Fleabag, Streetcar Named Desire. And what is your opinion about the same? What do you think about these adaptations? As adaptations are becoming more and more popular these days, so, do you think traditional theater is fading out and that such adaptations are taking over the traditional theater?
By traditional theater is, or Tamasa theater is traditional theater, Kathakali, Ykshigan, and Tao, and this, Bhagavad Mela, etc. These are the traditional theaters, and even the Sanskrit theater, Kudiyatam, etc., is traditional theater. You are talking of the conventional theater, most probably. Adaptation is a very good platform for experimentation and creativity. I myself has adapted 6 plays in English from 3 poems. One is The Last Ride Together, Ode to a Nightingale, and The Second Coming. These are the 3 poems I've adapted for a play. I've adapted a play from Return of the Little Master and The Lost Child, and of course, the Toba takes it. Adaptations are a very beautiful thing, and these just give you space for experimentation. And these are very effective, in fact, when you make adaptations. Adaptations from stories or adaptations from the original play, there are so many of these. This is a very common practice, adapting a new play from the old one. And this is a very useful practice.
Right. Yes, of course. There is also, I can see a question for you, Professor Purohit, from Dr. Shweta Kapoor. She wants to know how does the art of training in East distinguishes the Eastern theater identity from the identity of a Western performer? If you could.
When you talk of the art of training, we have the classical master, Stanislavski, who has given you the 3 books. An actor prepares, building a character, creating a role. These are the manuals of training. These are great manuals. And then he was followed by Grotowski, Meyerhold, and Eugenio Barba, and many others. So they have their art of, that is a different concept of, that is the modern realistic theater art of training. In India, we had a different kind of training. If you read the 36 chapters of Bharat Muni's Natya Shastra, every chapter prescribes the art of training. And dance is one of the most vital instrument of training in Indian system of theater performance. So Kathakali, if you have ever seen it on the media, every part of the body is trained in expressions, in gestures. It may be the eyelid, it may be the chin, it may be the nose, hands, fingers, bodies, and everything. That is the art of training. And that art of training still continues. Kalara Patti is one of the methods of training these actors. And in Chow, in traditional theater, the art of training exists. But you know, in the National School of Drama, these students of postgraduate theater or diploma students, they are given training in every form of, in a traditional, every traditional system, including Kathakali and Chow, and then they are given training in Bharatanatyam, given training in Tamasa dance, Tamasa singing. That is the beauty of the modern Indian theater, that we have borrowed, we have incorporated everything useful that was there in our traditional theater.
Right. Yes, of course. Right. Thank you so much, Professor Purohit. Now I see a question here from Shruti for Dr. Professor Raj Rao. So she wants to ask that the constant appropriation of queer identities by heterosexual writers and filmmakers dominate the film and literature. So do you think that this appropriation is also added on to by the privilege that they can choose to write about homosexuality without having to face the orthodox oppression society subject where writers do? Uh, is this willful ignorance of their own privilege also a form of homophobia and rejection of LGBTQIA plus identities?
Yes, I agree with that to some extent because, like I told you, Deepa Mehta said in interviews that Fire, according to her, was not a lesbian film per se, and on the contrary, accused the lesbian community of appropriating or hijacking the film. That is one example that one can give. Now you have, especially after the judgment, uh, mainstream filmmakers. I've not even seen most of these Indian films like what is it called? Um, Savdan. What is it called, Subhana? Can you help me? Shubha Mangal Jada Savdan or
Yes, yes.
Kapoor and Sons. I've not even seen these because they tend to be gestures. Deepti Naval made something called Memories in March. So you're right. But the thing is that it's not as if people from within the subculture are not making films. It's just that they don't have the same kind of visibility. Do you know that Sridhar Rangayan, for many years, has been indefatigably curating Kashish, which is an LGBT film festival every year in Bombay, and those films from all over the world, not just from India, are from filmmakers from within the fraternity. So the point of view and everything would differ. In my own case, one of the problems I have with Ashim Aluwalia, I don't know whether I'm sure he's not hearing this, but, is that the reason why the film has still not been made is that he tells me that, well, there are many people from all over the world, because he's trying to make it with collaboration and all that, who are willing to chip in provided I make this as a gay film. But he says, I'm not gay myself and I don't know. And he says, your novel has more to it than just gayness because it deals with with caste and everything. So appropriation is right. The thing is that who can stop them? I mean, this has happened to other constituencies as well, but it's a very good point that now then there's people like Karan Johar who are from within the subculture, but who are not brave enough because they are part of the mainstream and they think that it would sort of ostracize them and they would not be able to then function in the mainstream. So there are all these things. Yes, um, moderation and being genial. This was there even during the Stonewall riot of 1969 in New York, that there are broadly two approaches, a moderate approach and a militant approach. I personally think that militancy is the way to go about it. So these things are happening. The good thing about it is that, well, it is bringing the conversation center stage and society, because remember, I called society not just an ally, but an accomplice. And, society, mainstream society, that monster called society is becoming somewhat more aware. That is, the advantage. But then there are many disadvantages. And it's unfortunate, that happens, right? And
Absolutely.
also to sort of say, to sort of sit back and say, no, I'm not that way. This itself, you don't have to say this. You believe me, the number of people who will say, you show an interest in a homosexual subject, but you hasten to add, I'm not that way. You don't need to do that. And if you really understand the Kinsey study, the majority of heterosexual, exclusive heterosexual people are in the minority because human sexuality exists on a scale. There are more bisexual people than 100% heterosexual people. We are heteronormative, not heterosexual. So yeah, I agree with the first question. I agree with this point as well. Very good points. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I was also thinking that yes, this is strange that on one hand, if we have in the cinema industry people like you mentioned Karan Johar, we also have say Rituparna Ghosh who would
Yeah,
explicitly
I forgot Rituparna Ghosh. So
Rituparna
he is
Ghosh.
from within the subculture,
Yes,
But
yes,
then he's made most of his films in Bengali, so then that has a limited reach. Hindi cinema, of course, hogs the
yes,
limelight. So
yes,
unless it's
yes,
made in Hindi. Now, there are other ways. I have this video called Memories Pierce the Heart. I'll send you guys the link, homosexuality, Bollywood style, where you look at mainstream films. There's this queer theorist Alexander Doughty. He talks about this. You look at mainstream films and you reread them through a queer lens. You can
yeah,
read Sholay that way. You can read many mainstream films in that way. And I think that that's a fitting answer, to this, so that it becomes a faction fight, right? That there's that side and then there's this side. So I have this, I can establish that between 1970 and 1980, every one of Amitabh Bachchan's films, the songs he sang were always, there was a chemistry between him and the other hero. In Sholay, in Zanjeer, in Dostana, in all those films, That's what my I did this webinar for, it's called Empower People. I'll send you guys the link. And I think that this is legitimate. So it's like tit for tat. We give it back to you. You do this, and we will show you that you have not been able to read your own films, right?
yes. The
This
male
Sholay
friend.
song, I must tell you, a lot of people, Gayatri Gopinath, Ashok Rao Kavi, me, many others have written this. Ye dosti hum nahi todenge. If you a combination of the visuals and the lyrics in just that one song,
Yeah,
okay, Khana Pina Saath Hai, Marna Jeena Saath Hai, Sari Zindagi, is the equivalent of a marriage. These two macho men are saying, Khana Pina Saath Hai, Marna Jeena Saath Hai, Sari Zindagi, right? If that's not marriage, I have every right to read it in that way. And then the visuals. See that song, all the audience here, go back to that song. The last visual in that song is one of them perched on the shoulders of the other guy as he's riding the bike and massaging his head. Anywhere in the Western world, this would be taken to be a gay image. But we know it's just friendship. Why?
yeah.
Because it's same gender. If it was cross gender, you would immediately say that this is sexual. So this is coming from above. It's
I
not
agree.
coming from within.
Right. Yeah. So we have celebrated male friendship, but we dare not call it. Uh, yes.
This contract of silence. This is Ashok Rao Kavi's essay in Yarana, and this conspiracy. This has to go. There's too much. Subarna, believe me, there's too much hypocrisy around. Okay, most
Yes.
married men in India have at some time had a same-sex, at least a fling with another man. I can tell you that for sure. But no, outwardly you can't talk about it.
There is another question here that I can see to you that even after 377 was cut down, many homosexual people still face a lot of criticism, discrimination from the so called straight. What do you think is the root cause? Because if it is moralistic orthodox belief, then we have evidence from ancient Indian history that states otherwise, that homosexuality was not an entity to be feared, rather it was considered moral.
My
So
dear
she,
friend, that's why I said that society was an accomplice. So that even when the law has been changed, first of all, most people are not even aware of the law, but it's not going to change the thinking of people. And that's why I call them an accomplice. And as to this ancient India thing, that in pre colonial time, it's not as if it was widely accepted in pre colonial times. The difference between pre colonial and colonial India is that it was not a crime. There was no law that was criminalizing it, but even there it may have been frowned upon. So Devdutt Patnaik keeps on talking about, the mythology, the Shikandani sex change operation, there's this famous Korvogen Festival, where do you know that story in the Mahabharat war? Uh, Aravan was to be sacrificed because it either had to be Krishna or Arjuna or somebody else, and it couldn't be Krishna or Arjuna because they were important to the war. So they decided that Aravan would be sacrificed. But then Aravan said that before I am sacrificed, before I die, I want to, enjoy marital bliss. So for one night, Krishna transforms into a woman and becomes his bride. Now, this is celebrated in Kovagam near Pondicherry on the 15th of May every year. It's called the Korvogen Festival, where transgender people and hijras go there and become brides for one night because they can't otherwise be brides. And actually, there's a lot of straight men and even non-straight men, who go there. It becomes a kind of free for all at that time. There's a lot of, sexual debauchery that goes on in Kovagam, right? So all that is there. Kama Sutra is there. Khajuraho has a lot of homoerotic sculpture. But the other thing is that the British wanted to erase all that. What did Macaulay say even when he started English in this country, introduced English? He said a single shelf of a British library has more worthwhile knowledge than everything in Sanskrit and, blah, blah, blah. So they wanted to, this is the amnesia that Devi talks about, that have we really recovered? Devi calls his book After Amnesia, but have we really recovered from the amnesia? I don't think so. So this is how society is even worse than the law, because the law will do its bit. But what about people?
Right,
And that's why I gave you all those examples. Why did the Dabur ad, Shubhana, you tell me, why did you saw the Dabur ad? Why did it have to be withdrawn? Why did why are they saying that surrogacy now is only for heterosexuals? Why are they saying that? Right? Why did why was Saurabh Kirpal denied his elevation when he was due for it? Why was I denied my professor in headship when I was due for it? I got it eventually, but I got it not when I should have got it, and so on. Many examples can be. Why did poor Srinivas Ramchandra Stiras, that's the name of the Aligarh professor, why did he? Why is he dead today? He could have been alive.
right. Sir, we have a question from our MA first year student Yojana. So she wants to ask
Yeah,
that
Yojana is in my class. I know.
yeah. So do you think lesbian relationships are hidden or even not recognized because of how female friendship is perceived?
Yes, I did say that within the
friendship.
Yojana, I did say that I would completely agree that within the LGBT subculture, there's a hierarchy. Upper class gay men have it most easy, but for lesbians and trans people, it's much harder. There's this group in Jadavpur, not connected to the university. It's called SAPO for Equality.
Equality.
Yes, and Subarna, you heard of this, and they have
Yeah.
a record. They have this publication called Swakante in Bengali, and they have a whole record of the number of lesbian suicides that have taken place. I attended the SAPO meetings a couple of times, in Jadavpur. It's not connected to Jadavpur University, but they have it there, and they're lesbian, but not just in West Bengal. In Kerala, in Gujarat, there have been many instances of lesbian suicide. So it's of course it's harder. It's harder because lesbians become victims of a double bind. It's sexuality as well as gender, in a patriarchal setup. So they are lesbians, but they're also women. And for the trans people, it's even worse. Today, believe me, the transgender community has gotten alienated from us because they are saying that your agendas are different. What about us? Gender dysphoria, as it's called, because gender dysphoria is a very complicated thing, right? Where your birth gender and psychological gender are at odds with each other. Trans people are not necessarily homosexual. They can also be heterosexual. They can be queer. They can be, they can be somewhere on the spectrum. So it's extremely complicated. And then what about intersex? The old word for it was hermaphrodite. The I in LGBTQIA, asexual people. So there is clearly a hierarchy, and I completely agree with you. The thing is that we need to put up a joint fight. In the old days, actually, Eve Sedgwick, she says, in America, you know what happened? I hope I have time, Subarna, to say all this.
Yeah, so yeah, you can of course
I'll
complete.
just say it very
Yes.
quickly. But you know what happened in America post 1980 after AIDS made its appearance was that mainstream feminists dissociated themselves from lesbians because the whole idea of the pervert, got center stage. Till then, the view even was that feminism is the theory, lesbianism is the practice. Would you believe that? But once, and HIV and AIDS were affecting men and not women, the male gay community. But that was enough for mainstream heterosexual feminists to distance themselves from lesbians. So, I think that for lesbians, it's really a very lonely journey. There's this. As I talk, I'm remembering so many things. There was this wonderful article in this journal that comes out from Forum for Contemporary Thought in Baroda. You know which piece Carr runs this, and there was this wonderful essay where a lesbian scholar in Toronto. She says that. After the seminar, there was a seminar like this, and she says, I took a walk. I think it's called, I'm forgetting the name of the street where all the bars are. And she said, I couldn't find a single lesbian bar. There were gay bars, but it was mostly gay men. So she said that for lesbians, it's such a lonely thing, because if I'm looking for another woman to love, where am I going to find it? Right? So Yojana, your question is, it makes complete sense and it's unfortunate. Um, it, it shouldn't be like that, but that's how it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So, sir, there is another question for you. The person wants to ask that Akansha, Germany legalized gay marriage just 1 year before 2017. It was before 377 was ruled out. So she wants to know if you could name some German novels which might have chipped in or um, helped in this.
I can't do that. I'm not that familiar with German literature. In English literature, of course, there are well-known texts, but not recent ones. Among British writers, Alan Hollinghurst is a writer you want to read, because he's recent. He won the Booker Prize also against much opposition. But I'm sorry, among German writers, there's not anyone I can name offhand. But talking about legalizing gay marriage, in many of these Western countries, they make a distinction between gay marriage and civil unions. So a civil union is not strictly a marriage in the normal sense, in the sense in which heterosexuals have a marriage, but you can register a partnership. And even that is good enough because it means then that all the benefits that married heterosexual couples get will also be given to gay people who register their partnerships. Even that's good enough. But here in India, we don't even have that, and there's very strict opposition to it. So the case, like I said, is coming up for hearing in the Supreme Court next month. But I doubt that anything is going to happen.
Right. Thank you so much, sir, for patiently answering all our questions. There are many more in the chat box I can see, but because we are running short of time, I'm not able to direct all the questions to you. But thank you so much for enriching us, for patiently answering, and my heartfelt gratitude to Professor Dr. D.R. Purohit also. So I now invite Dr. Anil Adagale, Associate Professor, Department of English, to take over and propose the vote of thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. Honorable dignitaries, our most valued invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion. It has been such an honor to be a part of this wonderful event. On behalf of Department of English, Symbiosis College of Arts and Commerce, I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to our esteemed guest, Dr. Medha Bhattacharya, Professor Dr. Kamlakar Bhatt, Dr. D.R. Purohit, and Professor Dr. R Raja Rao for offering this wonderful literary feast. Sincere thanks to Dr. Rishikesh Soman, our principal, and Vice Principal Dr. Tesi Tadadil for their unstinting guidance.
Is it good?
A wide round of applause and thanks to all the participants, faculty as well as students who made the event a memorable one. We are grateful to the Symbiosis Society and the admin staff for their support. Our special thanks to the IT team, Mr. Nitin and Mr. Nazir, for their technical support. Last but not the least, we are thankful to all the heads of the department, faculty, and my department colleague, Professor Dr. Aarti Vani, head of the English department, Dr. Shweta Kapoor, Dr. Subarna Bhattacharya, and Ms. Devika Duma for taking efforts to make this seminar a successful one. Thank you one and all. I declare this webinar over with the permission of the authorities. Thank you very much. Thank you.
We'll be sharing the feedback link with all of you. Please fill the form and you'll receive the certificates immediately.